When you've seen enough of Freddy laugh and Jason slash and Pinhead showing you all the sights he has to show you, you might want to be looking a little further underground at some lesser known horror titles. But once you start diving into that, you realize how deep this rabbit hole goes and who is there to guide you. Well, never fear, for I am back with another episode of horror movies you've probably never heard of. Let's get ready for some... Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and for those of you that have seen this channel before, or you rotted souls that have subscribed, welcome back. For those of you that are new to this channel, hi! So I wanted to start things off and introduce this video by acknowledging that if all I'm doing is talking about the stuff that's off the beaten path and all I'm doing is looking at the releases from 2018 and 2019, I'm probably going to wind up with a whole lot of videos that are basically just one-star reviews of crap. So I wanted to deviate a little bit. There is a little bit in this, but my selections here have kind of purposefully chosen something that I still think is fairly relatively obscure, and I stopped, I think, using IMDb as a metric of this just because of the rating padding that is present in there. It's become too unreliable, and in this case I am strictly going with Letterboxd. Now, if I am going with an older movie, I am giving myself just a little bit more of an allowance as far as the number of people that have watched the movie recorded by Letterboxd, but still I am trying to keep it well under the margins of what we would consider to be a popular movie. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. First movie up is Ghost in the Graveyard, 2019. A young girl begins unraveling a town's secrets after returning home and being haunted by visions of a dead childhood friend. This is going to be a quick review. I'm going to go ahead and throw up all the scores here. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And this movie, by all accounts, is worth passing on. The storyline and script were all over the place, and the characters' subterfuge, both good and bad, were basically not done very well, and it just made the entire movie a big muddled mess. All of the characters were one-dimensional and just really, really uninteresting. This did have Jake Busey in it, and I think he was the most interesting character of the bunch, but it definitely wasn't enough to inject any kind of life into this movie. His role was too small, and the impact was just too minimal. But as far as why this movie didn't work, aside from the script being, bad, everything felt very cheap. And I understand having a low budget. This probably didn't have a big wallet behind it. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you need to highlight things that should feel bigger. And what I mean by that is, in one particular scene here, there's a crime scene in which a young girl died and her body was moved and found a few yards away, let's say. And this is the crime scene.
You want me to keep an eye on her?
For the scene that is being described, it should have a cavalcade of all sorts of people in Tyvek suits and all sorts of... That doesn't mean you had to have that scene, or you couldn't at the very least have a closer, intimate shot of it. You don't need to have a long shot, a wide shot, and really highlight how paltry the budget was in light of what should have been there. And the sheriff's uniforms are another example of this, and this is honestly one that I don't buy as far as the budget being tight goes. The sheriff's uniforms, and the sheriffs are a big part of this movie, so the fact that they only have 2 badges on them, one is the American flag and the other is the word sheriff, it just doesn't fly for me. I mean, even people with low budget constraints can still find, uniform rentals for costume. There's all sorts of places out there where you can rent movie costumes basically for not a whole lot of money, and that's what they really should have done in this case. It seems like they tried to cobble things together themselves and just did a very low effort style of it. So just not a whole lot really salvageable with this one. It's a total score of 28 out of 100 points, and I would say that this is absolutely one that is worth a pass. 1985's The Doctor and the Devils, a cinematic telling of the true story of 19th century grave robbers who sold their illegal acquisitions to a local doctor to further the studies of anatomy. Not feeling inclined to dig if they don't have to, as well as being hounded for fresher subjects, they decide to promote themselves from grave robbers to murderers. So this was a remarkable one for me. I'm not going to lie. I thought this was fantastic. It was one of those where it's obscure. I've never heard of it. I'm not guaranteeing that nobody else has ever heard of it, but it only has 398 views on Letterboxd, and it's honestly surprising. I think that this is one that should be viewed more. This is why I'm glad to be making these videos. If this can make a difference and get people to watch some of these movies, then I am all about that. But considering who it was written by, who produced it, and who starred in it, I'm really surprised it's been hidden in the shadows this long. This was written by Dylan Thomas, the early 19th century Welsh poet. Back in the 1940s he wrote this. I mean, he's the poet that, do not go gently into that good night. He wrote the screenplay to this, and it sat basically in one form or another of development hell until they decided to go ahead and revise the screenplay a little bit and pretty much release it as much as possible true to the original Dylan Thomas screenplay, and produced it and released it in 1985. But this was also produced by Mel Brooks Films, who the same production company that released The Elephant Man. So they did go on some serious ventures and try to get some serious movies released out there, and this is absolutely one of them. Aside from being produced by Mel Brooks, there's really nothing funny about this film. And one hell of a cast. Holy shit. This had Timothy Dalton in his last role before jumping into the shoes of James Bond, Jonathan Pryce, Patrick Stewart, Twiggy, if you know Twiggy, but just a real cavalcade of very high quality actors. If you wanted to see Patrick Stewart with the last remnants of hair before he decided to go and jump into Captain Picard's uniform, this is a great movie for that.
I too, sir, am in the business of anatomy, but I acquire my knowledge professionally, not by breaking the law.
And he delivers a good performance. It's a smaller performance. He's a sideline character. But, Jonathan Pryce and Timothy Dalton are really kind of the stars of this movie, if you will. They're definitely the main leads, and they do a fantastic job. The acting quality in this one is great. The storyline is very interesting, if not a bit predictable. It's really just kind of following the natural course of events as you would expect them to unravel, as the plot and the characters, it just kind of goes down its natural. You start kicking rocks down a hill, they're going to roll to the bottom, and that's kind of watching this movie go by. So there's not a whole lot of surprises or secrets or anything contained within, but it was still a story told fairly well. And despite the cast, I would say that the real star of this movie is the set design. Being set in early 19th century England, it was grimy, it was seedy. You really felt like you were going to get consumption and the clap just by walking into the local pub. Everything about it really spoke volumes, and it sold the storyline. And so with a score of 73 out of 100 points, I would say that there is nothing about this movie that is epic for the ages. This was not Spartacus. This is not the kind of movie where I'm going to rattle my saber and say that everybody should absolutely see, but I will say that it doesn't deserve its place in obscurity like it currently is. And if this video, like I said, can get more people watching it, then I think that is absolutely worth it. This is one that I would absolutely recommend. The Doctor and the Devils. The Tombs, 2019. A series of Hollywood misfits are taking a live-streamed haunted house tour in promotion of an upcoming film, only to find that an evil spirit is awakened and intent on murder. And so with only 38 views on Letterboxd, I think that I can safely say that this movie deserves no more than 38 views on Letterboxd. This movie was fucking painful. It was miserable and terrible from start to finish, and there wasn't a single redeeming quality to it. The worst parts of this film was the dialogue, both in how it was written and how it was presented by the actors. Not a single solitary goddamn line in this movie sounded comfortable or natural.
It looks like this is where we're going our separate ways then.
Sorry if I upstage you, but,
Yeah, the new generation.
Can we quit the chit-chat and keep moving?
No, please wait.
Hey, don't worry, Tanya. Nothing bad's gonna happen. It's just a show.
And there was a lot of dialogue in it. Nothing about this movie worked. Nothing about this made sense. Nothing about it felt natural. Nothing about it felt cohesive. Nothing about it was interesting. The entire script should have been burned. But what's that you say? A script doesn't necessarily need to be good for horror fans as long as the kills are quality? Well, tough shit on that one too, because most of the kills were off screen. I'd say about 90% of the kills were off screen, and the 10% that weren't were pretty lackluster. There's really nothing to watch about this one. There's really nothing to enjoy about this one. The only positive thing I can say about it is that some of the camera work felt a little bit more polished than I expected, but then again, considering the script and the dialogue that we were working with, as far as my expectations go, I would think that this movie was filmed with a potato. So a score of 14 out of 100 points, and that's all the time I feel inclined to give this turd. Bloodsucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh, 1991. Two detectives are hot on the trail of a mysterious killer attacking seemingly random people and stealing various body parts. Now, considering this movie's been around for almost 3 decades and it only has 424 views on Letterboxd, I thought that it would be a prime candidate for this list, and as soon as I saw the title and the box art, I knew that I absolutely had to watch and review it. But it honestly managed to surprise me. There is a certain level of expectation you have once you pop in a movie called Bloodsucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh. But I wasn't quite expecting the Naked Gun style humor to it. This had a very, very slapsticky, wicked, and greasy sense of humor all throughout it. And I kind of got to the point where I was about 45 minutes in, and I had to pause. I had to take a little bit of a bathroom break, and I kind of puttered outside of my office, and I locked eyes with my fiance, and I had to admit, I'm like, I kind of hate myself a little bit for how much I'm loving this movie. And that's the honest to God truth. And I do love it. I mean, it's not a great movie, but I do love it, and I do think that it should be seen by more folks. It should be brought out of the shadows and into the limelight a little bit more. For nothing else, then this is a movie that had its special effects and so forth done by Tom Savini. I was really surprised to see his name pop up on the screen in the opening credits, but there we are. And having watched the movie, I can absolutely see his influence to it.
It won't be so bad, big guy.
This time he took her brain.
Oh my God.
The humor and the plot and everything aside, if you are just a horror fan looking for some quality kills, this movie really delivers. It does have that kind of that humorous horror aspect of gore to it. Now, let's just say, for instance, that a killer wants to acquire a victim's digestive tract. Now, in a normal horror movie, they might take them aside, maybe knock them out and strap them to a table, have plastic sheeting all around, and, surgical scalpel go down there and have them wake up in the middle of the procedure and, gruesomeness and so forth there. Or you can shove a fucking shop vac in their mouth and turn it on turbo. That's the kind of movie this is, and it revels in it, and you just can't help but smile and enjoy the ride with the movie. The aesthetic to it is off-putting in some of the best ways possible. You can almost taste the air of this movie. It's like stale whiskey and BO. Something about the unique style to it, it works on that level. But I would say that although I do think this is a great ride, and I do think that this is a movie that should be seen more, I will admit that I think it should be watched with friends. Because if you watch it like I did, just solo, I would say that as far as the humor goes, it doesn't have the charm to sustain throughout. About the time of, I would say, the end of Act 2, the beginning of Act 3, I was starting to check out on the humor levels there. The jokes just weren't landing as often or as hard for me, and I kind of had to, at that point, kind of force myself to continue on. But I think that if I was watching this with friends, it would just be howling laughter through and through, bouncing off of one another, and just loving the ridiculousness of the situation and the movie. So I would absolutely recommend Bloodsucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh. 2019's The Ascent. A widowed father suffering from schizophrenia struggles to keep his head above water while maintaining custody of his son. When his son becomes the target of demonic possession, his struggles intensify as he fights for the child's soul as well as his own sanity. And so with only 190 views on Letterboxd, I would say that this is not a bad movie. but it is one that I would hesitate to recommend, and the reason why is unfortunately something that I am going to have to be discussing in a bit of a spoilery fashion. And that, honestly, in and of itself, is one of the big problems that I have with this movie, is it's difficult to discuss the pros and cons and the merits and the weaknesses without getting darn spoilery about it. So fair warning, I'm going to be discussing the Ascent in a very open and spoilery way. Feel free to go ahead and pause, skip, or stop the video now if you choose to. Now, the reason I say that I have to be spoilery about it is because this movie has a twist, and it doesn't pull it off well at all. And so the big problem with this twist is the fact that the entirety of the rest of the movie revolves around it, and makes no sense without it. And okay, I can understand this to a certain level. When we're dealing with a mystery, a lot of times that mystery will have a lot of pieces hanging up in the air. Everything gets locked into place when the twist is revealed and the final solution is there, and then all of the rest of it makes sense. Fine, okay, I get that. But at the same time, delivering this information to the audience is a very subtle thing. It has to be dealt with a deft hand. It's like a magician doing his illusion. There's always multiple layers of information that's going on. There's what's actually happening. All the magicians and the assistants and so forth are in on it as they're executing the illusion. And then there's the information that's being provided to the audience, the top layer that is meant to be subterfuge until the information is properly wanted to be released and the layers basically switch and the end is revealed without revealing the bottom layer of how it happened. But you can't draw attention to the bottom layer before the reveal is ready. And that's really kind of what that comes down to. If you're talking about a magician's illusion where they have the magician's twin in the audience and he's ready to do the quick disappear, reappear act in the audience, the Prestige style, the one thing you don't want to do is draw any attention to the audience. You don't, as the magician, want to be doing anything other than getting the audience's attention on you until you're ready to disappear and then reappear over there. You don't want to say, by the way, don't look over there, Mr. or Mrs. Smith, or something like that. You don't want to do that. And this movie did that in droves. Nothing about the father and son's relationship in this house made any sense whatsoever to me. And I was ready to call it out on it. I was watching the movie, and up until the last moments, I was ready to rail on that in the review. I would say that there's a lot of good aspects to this. The relationship between the father and the son, it worked. I thought that the acting performances and the chemistry between the two felt natural. I liked it. There were a lot of aspects of this movie that I really wanted to like. But the fact that the father's trying to retain custody of his son and trying to put his best foot forward and trying to work hard and so forth, but while at the same time living in basically the Addams family house, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. The set design really looked like it was just purposefully, if you were an absolute horror maniac and you wanted to keep every prop and set, just completely deck your house out in the absolute dankest, darkest, macabre stuff, that's what this house would look like. And it didn't make sense for me for this father to live like that. And, especially, like I said, trying to retain custody of his son and then maintaining his relationship with his therapist, it felt like it was very awkward. Like it should be kind of a collaborative effort between the father, his therapist, and CPS or other thing. There were just elements about it that didn't work, and I was ready to call it out on that. And then the twist happened. And then all of a sudden, everything that I was going to complain about made sense, and it got excused. But at the same time, had the twist not happened, had the movie just kind of drawn to its natural plot progression conclusion without any sort of twist whatsoever, the rest of the movie wouldn't have really made a whole lot of sense. The entirety of the rest of the movie was birthed and fostered and cared for and treated only in service of the twist ending. And that's the part that I had a real problem with. If the father's relationship with the therapist and the situation with retaining the custody of his son felt more natural, if it felt more real, if the set design didn't call so much attention to itself, if there were elements in place where this movie would have stood on its own 2 feet properly, even without the twist, then I would have much, much fewer complaints about this film. But as it stands, I would say that a total score of 56 out of 100 points... I did not hate this movie. I did not have a bad time watching it. But I would say that even though I would say it's not a bad film, I do hesitate. I'm not going to say I don't recommend it, but I hesitate on recommendations for it. It's kind of your mileage may vary. I'm interested. I would honestly say that although I hesitate to recommend it, I'm curious. I want you to watch it. I want you to watch it and give your feedback to me on what you thought of it and see if maybe our thoughts aligned on it. I do apologize for the spoilery nature, but like I said, that was kind of the big problem in and of itself, is it was impossible to talk about the pros and cons of this movie. I couldn't just address the set design without getting spoilery about it. And that is unfortunately part of the problem is, well, I've rambled too long as it is. But suffice it to say, 56 out of 100 points. Your mileage may vary. Please get back to me. Leave comments. I would love to hear them. So that should about do it. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you next Friday. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. It helps me out more than you know. And if you want to support me further, my Patreon and my merchandise storefront links are below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.